The Bill and Kelly Show is recorded at Studio A at Executive Suite Squared in beautiful Hammond, Indiana. Now, here's Bill and Kelly. Welcome to the Bill and Kelly Show. With us, we have David Benjamin, who actually,
talented David Benjamin.
I don't know if you realize this is your third time on our show.
And I'm grateful.
That's a badge of honor that
It is.
Yeah, that not many people have.
Yeah.
Well, with the exception of one sheriff in Indiana, but that's
Well,
a
yeah.
different story. So you rate with the sheriff. There you go. So David, we are really happy to have you back on. We've had you on several times to talk about your books, and this time I want to thank you. Although thank you and question you, I'm not sure if this was a reading assignment or not, but David sent me about 5 inches thick of his books. Of one of them is about 3. So David, I will confess, I didn't read all 3 of them.
Oh, I know that. Yes. You've already confessed that to me. And it was not a reading assignment.
Okay. You started reminding me of my lit professor back in college days, and I'm like, oh boy, here he is recreated again.
My motto, ever since I started writing, basically writing for an audience when I was a freshman in high school, was fun to read. Mm-hmm. If I'm not fun to read, I don't want people to read me. So
you are fun to read.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes. In fact, I'm going to share one of my favorite lines out of any book that I ever read, where you compare a tourist bus to a Nazi bus guarding. Dexter didn't like that.
Oh, Dexter!
Yeah.
Dexter. I'm shutting the door.
Yeah. Dexter always comes on our show unexpectedly.
Right. Well, I have jackhammers today outside the window, so I had to shut the window for you guys.
Yeah, there. But it brings an ambiance to the. It's
ambiance.
Is
that a word for Dexter? I would never have used that word for Dexter.
He's.
Yeah, he's at it again.
You heard his name? Yes, I know. Yeah.
Well, David, welcome again back to the show, and really serious. And I've got to say, I appreciate you sending me the books. I am, and you started out as an essayist, and that's what I take. Almost Killed by a Train of Thought was just a collection of marvelous essays, and then there's one, Summer of '68, which is more of a historical perspective. That's the summer assassination of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. And so what was going on in society back then. And then, of course, from a similar historical perspective, they shot Kennedy. And it will put this up in graphics.
So people can actually
that's
see
why
it
we're
well.
recording.
There it is. Nice. Without all the.
Yeah, we've got this light over here because we need something to accent our beautiful.
Right, there we go. There's the book. Okay.
There you go.
Book.
We'll put it up with graphics.
Yeah.
So.
www.lastkidbooks.com.
That's
there
right.
There you go. And when we start off, you talk to us a bit about Almost Killed by a Train of Thought. And,
you said you started out as an essayist. When I launched my imprint, Last Kid Books, I started. I wanted to separate myself. I've told you told you guys this before. I wanted to start out with a kind of a splash that separated me from self-published writers. So I picked 3 of my titles, and I launched them all at once on April Fool's Day last year. And the first title that came out was Almost Killed by a Train of Thought, which is a compilation or a collection of some of what I call my weekly screed. I write a weekly essay. I've been writing essays just about every week since 1974, 75. So the accumulation in various publications, and right now I send it to a list of friends by email, and I also post it on two or three of my Facebook pages, and I also have a blog spot page. So my weekly street goes to all those different places, and so I've got a lot of them. So putting 70 in a book like this was barely made a dent in my output. But I tried to pick good ones and funny ones. The other two books that came out at the same time were Summer of '68 and Skullduggery in the Latin Quarter. Summer of '68 takes place in a Wisconsin art and music summer camp based on my own experiences at Hull House Camp in East Troy, Wisconsin. And of course, all the kids were from Chicago. And all the work campers, Job Corps people who built the camp were from Chicago. And most of the faculty who were teaching were from Chicago. And these counselors, I was among them, were from colleges all over the Midwest. I was at Rockford College at the time. It's really about the theme in that is similar to the theme in the book They Shot Kennedy, in that it's about a coming of age in a period of tremendous historical turmoil. And so this is my character's name is Franklin Roosevelt Cribbs. All of his friends call him Cribbsy. And Cribbsy goes through all these personal crises when he does this in They Shot Kennedy in 1963. He does it again in summer of '68, in 1968. And his age doesn't work properly, but I call that authorial license. I use Cribbsy as a witness to history, and he's the only character I use the first person. But in each of the books, Cribbsy is growing up while great things are happening around him, and he has, and like all of us, it's difficult for him to process the big events in the world while coping with his own problems and his own travails and his own romances and crises. And that's one of the themes that I've been writing about it all my life.
So you're using a major historical event as a backdrop to the story of
I refer to They Shot Kennedy as a teenage comedy with the background of a national tragedy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, that's boy, I can't wait to get into that book. And then of course in the summer of '68, a similar thing, or is
Cribbsy is he's just graduated from high school in Madison.
Right.
He gets this job as a counselor at Camp Nantucket, and he goes into and Camp Nantucket is 1968 Chicago, lifted from the city and dropped into the Wisconsin woods, because the entire culture of the city has been moved into this spot in the woods. And really Hull House Camp in 1968, where I was actually a counselor, and that was after my freshman year in college, actually. You had kids from the Gold Coast. You had kids from the deep, dark south side of Chicago. You had faculty from all the great universities in the Midwest, and it was just this melting pot of characters who were tremendously urban and richly diverse, well, some of them were outright dangerous. All the work campers were Job Corps guys who had been, who were essentially convicts. They'd been in jail, and they were put into this job under some very, very tough counselors, grown-up guys with attitudes who rode herd on them and taught them all kinds of skills that they didn't have. And they built the camp, and the Job Corps, the work campers were really kind of the backbone of the place, because they lent a spirit of diligence and sobriety, although they were all they'd all been in trouble before, that the kids and the counselors and the faculty really didn't have. But it was an art and music camp too. So kids were playing music and putting on plays and doing writing assignments and doing all that kind of stuff. It was fascinating. It was a great experience. And I try to convey the richness of that experience in summer of '68. But that was also the summer when Chicago exploded. That was the Democratic National Convention, and that tension in the background is always there. Chicago was an amazing place that year. It was a scary place, but it was amazing. You know.
Yeah. So, gosh, you call to mind, and again, people talk about the 9/11 that time, and then we have '68, Kennedy being shot, Robert Kennedy, and then Martin Luther King, and then the convention in Chicago.
Oh yeah.
Boy, and now, would you say that 2020 could go down as history along with those?
Oh, absolutely. It goes down in history in a totally different way. But look, we've never been locked up like this because of a disease since 1918, and none of us were around in 1918. There might be 10 or 12 people in America who are alive today, who were alive and aware of what was going on in 1918. I recently read William Barry's book about the Great Influenza, which is a wonderful history book, but it brought home to me the immense impact of that pandemic on American society and world society, and it also brought home to me the effect of government indifference on something like that. Woodrow Wilson never admitted that there was a pandemic sweeping across the country. The President of the United States was focused entirely on World War I. And so he never acknowledged it, and he never mobilized any sort of government action to assist states and cities in fighting the pandemic. Amazing.
Well, there's a large amount of parallel instances being brought back to the Spanish flu and what we're going through now. It's interesting you bring up that topic about a president who ignores the impact of a pandemic, because it calls to mind a essay that you had in Almost Killed by a Train of Thought, in a essay appropriately named "A Thousand Rings and a Single Clown."
Oh yes, this was I wrote about. I was living in Brooklyn, and actually I lived in Brooklyn. I was returning to see a friend, and we met each other at a I think it was an Afghan restaurant or something like that on Fifth Avenue in Brooklyn. Fifth Avenue in Brooklyn is totally different from the Fifth Avenue where Donald Trump lives. It's an amalgamation of every ethnic group and every occupation and every kind of small business and mom and pop operation that you can find anywhere. It's a wonderful street, and in this essay, although I never mentioned Donald Trump's name, I just refer to him as him and he, because he grew up in Queens in a very, very similar milieu, and yet his attitudes about race and diversity are completely antithetical to this kind of atmosphere. I get into a place like that. It was kind of like when I was working at Hull House Camp in East Troy, Wisconsin. I was absolutely captivated by the range of people that you get when you're in a big city, and I've always been curious about that ever since I was little. I've always been more interested in other types of people than my types of people. And so walking down Fifth Avenue in Brooklyn, and the essay is simply a catalog, really, of all the different sights and sounds and people that you come across in a casual stroll through Brooklyn. Brooklyn's a fascinating place. And so I make a comparison between what that feels like and what Donald Trump's mind apparently never saw in this great circus of people and sights and sounds and feelings and smells and tastes.
I suspect maybe that because of his family was very well to do, that he was probably isolated from a lot of that.
Oh yeah, he was in a gated community, Jamaica Estates. It was they were cut off from all the stuff right around them.
Right, which
is sad.
Even so, it's really tough because the times when I've been in New York in the boroughs, that it's like you take a breath and you're in another borough. I mean, in fact, people, and at times I come to defense New Yorkers because of the different lifestyle, different attitude. And what people don't realize is, when you literally have to fight for a spot in line or a spot to get something, your attitude changes. And I'm like, they're just being typical East New Yorkers. Kelly agrees with me.
You have to wear a little armor in New York. Yeah, that's also true in Chicago too.
Yeah.
But I've discovered after a few weeks living in New York, the secret to taming New Yorkers is to be stupid. They know everything. So if you approach a New Yorker and ask something, you're talking to a know-it-all, and he or she is just going to spill their knowledge and befriend you because you're stupid. And once that subtle hierarchy is established, he's the know-it-all and you're the moron, then you can get along just fine. And eventually, because you stay in proximity to this know-it-all, you gain knowledge and you become almost a peer with a New Yorker.
Yeah, my other opinion is their consumption of caffeine. It almost is equivalent to what Kelly consumes in a day. And I was exposed to Bronx coffee, and it literally was paste. I witnessed about 15 scoops being put into what we would normally put 3 or 4 scoops in. And I'm like, oh man, no wonder you guys are killing each other up here. But it is a different culture. And the thing is that like I said, you take a drive and I've never witnessed any part of New York that didn't have traffic jam or hold up. And, you were just elbow to elbow all the time. A lot of people enjoy that. In fact, I did. In fact, I want to go back to New York maybe sometime when I didn't have to get to a meeting in 5 minutes and I'm stuck in a tunnel somewhere. And so that's one of my hopes is to get back there and enjoy some of the culture they have and some of the art, the Broadway. That's one thing that New York has always brought is performance, performing arts and that type of thing. So yeah, but I did enjoy your title essay and kind of undercover, but not. So
well, the last recalling that particular essay at the very end, the scene that I described is I was going past the BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and I passed this group of girls, and one girl caught my eye, and then she just did this little dance. She smiled at me. She did this little dance, and it was a combination of exuberance and guerrilla theater. She was testing my reaction, and when I smiled at her and responded positively, I could see her react very. I could see her pleasure. She had done her little dance, and she had gotten a kind of a silent applause from me, and she kind of typified the insouciance of New Yorkers. You know, they're always out front, and they're always a little bit well, they're a little bit theatrical.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I do want to call to mind our viewers and listeners who have never or don't know of you is the amount of places you've lived in your lifetime. So you want to share with us about those places and you know how they've kind of influenced you as an author?
Well, yeah, I probably it all started. I was at Rockford College. I had this issue with a girlfriend, and I couldn't stand to stay on campus anymore. So right in the middle of the Vietnam War, I dropped out of college and moved to Boston. I was going to go to California with this girl named Elf. But she decided she was going to go to Boston instead. So I said, I'll go to Boston with you. Then she decided she wasn't going to go anyway. But by then I was committed, and I moved. I went to Boston. I spent a few months there. Ended up going to Florida, working in a steel factory in Florida in the heart of the summertime, which I don't recommend. And that got me kind of hooked on mobility and being, you know, looking around and seeing what the rest of the world was like. And so, and then when I was, I was years later, I was working at a newspaper. I was the editor of a weekly newspaper in Mansfield, Massachusetts, the Mansfield News. And I finally, you know, after 7 years at that, I got hired at a consulting company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Arthur D. Little Incorporated. And they wanted me there to write a book. And I was a ghostwriter for a book called Breakthroughs, which was about inventions. And they put this huge budget into sending me with consultants all over the world to talk to inventors. I talked to Arthur Jones, who invented the Nautilus machine. I met Phil Knight, who invented Nike. Had an interview with Fred Smith at Federal Express. Met the inventor of the CAT scan machine, named Godfrey Hounsfield, who was in London, and he won the Nobel Prize. And he was just the sweetest guy. And I went to Japan to talk to the inventor of VHS, the video format, which swept the world and changed everybody's idea of how to watch movies and how to record movies and so forth. I met my wife there actually when I was interviewing Shiraishi-san, who was the inventor of VHS. And you know, at that point, I was hooked on going places. After about 3 years, still living in Boston, I moved to Japan and married Junko, my wife, who is, by the way, one of the best journalists in the world. And then you know, luckily, you know, she went to work for a publication called EE Times, Electronic Engineering Times, which is presumably the Bible of high tech. This is what I call it. She's now the international editor-in-chief of EE Times, and she had to go everywhere to conferences and so forth. And so we lived in Japan for a while. Then she was reassigned to California. We moved there. Then she was reassigned to Paris. We moved there. Then she was reassigned to New York. We moved there. And wherever she has gone, I have been what I call the trailing spouse. But it's given me, all those experiences all over the world have given me a vast range of locales and settings for fiction. Which is not necessarily a good thing, because agents and publishers want you to find a silo and stay there. They want you to be genre specific, and I can do almost every genre except romance. I can do romantic comedy, but I cannot do romance, which is, of course, the most lucrative form of writing. I do a kind of a genre mockery whenever I'm writing. I don't I can fit into a mystery genre, but I do it tongue in cheek, and I add little humorous flourishes that bother the purists in the genre. But you know, my problem all my life, and probably the curse in my literary career, is my sense of humor.
You know, you just reminded me of another author that did a similar thing. That he did a mockery of the spy type or Private Eye. You know, everyone wrote stories about Private Eye.
Sure. Yeah.
And I remember the name of the book. Can't remember the name of the author. One of his titles was "Don't Point That Thing at Me," and the main.
I have that book. Yes.
Okay. And what was?
It's in the bookcase behind me, and I would have to leave the camera. But I will. I'll send you an email.
Oh, that'd be
good.
great. That'd be great because he had 3 books. But the main character was he had a drinking problem, and he was just a stumbling fool that stumbled upon solutions to the investigation. It was just a comedy. It was an absolute wonderfully written book. But that when you say a mockery, that's what it reminded me of actually. So
Well, you know, one of my favorite, you know, if people ask me who my favorite authors are, and I never mention people like Saul Bellow and Philip Roth, but I do mention people like Donald E. Westlake, who wrote he's one of the most prolific authors who's ever come out of New York City, and he writes mysteries, crime novels. He's written under probably 6 or 7 different names. But the series that I enjoy most is his Dortmunder series, which includes things like Bank Shot and let's see. No, I can't think of any titles. What's the worst that could happen? And one of my favorites is Drowned Hopes. But Dortmunder is a burglar. So these are, you know, so you're on the crook's side in these things, and he has this crew of people who are just classic New York, and they're a funny group, and the capers that they set up always go awry in some way or another, and Dortmunder has to save the whole project, and of course he manages to keep everybody out of jail, but you know, they never get any money out of it. And the Dortmunder novels are just a really like, as you say, they're both very well, they're all very well constructed, and they are caper novels, but they're also funny, and they're also satirical of the whole genre, and so it's just great fun to read. There was one passage in one of his books. He has to do a caper in Las Vegas. And he meets this guy who's a New Yorker. He grew up in New York, but he's been in Vegas for like 20 years, and he misses New York, right? And so the guy says, look, hey, listen, say something New York to me. And Dortmunder says, what for? And the guy says, thanks.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, we were talking about New York. This is that kind of summarizes the New York attitude, and Westlake understood that perfectly. You know.
I got a question asked because I didn't know this before. Probably you mentioned it to me and I just didn't sink in. So you and your wife are authors, and so what does that relationship look like? I mean, do you guys have like laptops at the dining room table and as you're eating dinner, or what does that relationship look like?
Well, she's actually at the dining room table right now with her laptop doing a conference call. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
We'd love to have her on, by the way, with both you on. That'd be
that would be great.
if you guys could coexist, or would she have to be upstairs and you downstairs type of thing?
Well, her habit before the pandemic was to go up the street to a coffee shop where she had an upstairs corner where she worked by herself. But she and it wasn't because we've been working side by side now since we got back here in March, but we don't really have that many clashes. We have this habit of, if I'm busy with something and she tries to say something to me, I say, shut the hell up. And if she's doing something and I try to interrupt her, she says, "Get away from me." But but that's you guys probably do that too.
I was about to say you two are beginning to sound very much like us on a minute by minute basis. Yeah.
But she started as a journalist. She was in public relations at JVC when I met her, and a Japanese Victor company. But she took a job with EE Times in I think 1990, and she asked me to help vet the publication and vet the editor who was hiring her, because I'd been a journalist long before that. So she had to shift to writing news copy in a second language, in English.
Mm.
So I assured her that I could help her, and I've been her copy editor ever since then for 30 years now.
Oh.
And so in that sense, we are, we're an effective team. She has become one of the most important reporters in all of high technology. And right now she's she is the award-winning master of technology reporting in automated vehicles and automated vehicle safety and all that self-driving stuff. She was at the ground floor of covering that, and so she gets invited to conferences to talk about this.
Wow.
Well, you shouldn't have told us that, because she'll become our favorite author now.
Yeah, you're gonna buy an AV.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, we better start wrapping this up, because Dexter's letting us know he needs attention.
Yeah.
And besides that, we got to get you back. But boy, this has been wonderful. Before we go though, let's go over a couple of things. Any new books on the horizon?
Well, I just got word about 3 weeks ago from Random House that they were surrendering the rights to one of my earliest books, The Life and Times of the Last Kid Picked. The name of my company, Last Kid Books, is based on The Life and Times of the Last Kid Picked. So I'm right now I'm in an editing phase, doing a little bit of rewrite on The Life and Times of the Last Kid Picked, and that will be my fall title, coming out probably around the 1st of October. And this is about growing up in Tomah, Wisconsin, and a little bit of Madison when I was a kid. And in fact, the voice of Cribsy, which appears in They Shot Kennedy and Summer of '68, is the same voice the same first person voice that I use in The Life and Times of the Last Kid Picked. There are actually 4 books in which I use that same first person voice, which I refer to as bruised innocence. And so that, I get all these people who ask me all the time, like, why aren't you selling The Life and Times of the Last Kid Picked? And I say, well, I have to tell them it's a Random House book, it's out of print. But now I can tell them I'm selling that book. Right.
Yeah, which always amazes me about authors and past publishing houses, because it's like, who owns my work? Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I do want to remind our listeners, the ones that you sent me, Summer of '68. I can't wait to read that. They Shot Kennedy, and then your collection of essays, The Almost Killed by a Train of Thought. And so again, these are available. Tell us a bit about where they can pick these books up at or buy them online.
Right. Well, these are, all my titles. There are 8 Last Kid book titles now, and the best way for people to buy it, since I haven't been able to get into many bookstores lately, and so they aren't really abundant in bookstores right now. I hope there will be soon. But my website is www.lastkidbooks.com, and I make the most money if you purchase the book directly from my website rather than going to Amazon or Barnes & Noble. They are available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and so forth. There are a lot of sources. You just have to look up lastkidbooks.com or use my name and go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever,
All right.
All right, great. Great to know. Great to know. David, as always, it has been a pleasure. Entertaining as always.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, you guys are fun to talk to.
Thanks.
You
Yeah.
should be on the radio.
Hey, what a great idea.
We were at one time, and we got kicked off. FCC.
We did not. It's a liar.
We're no longer on the radio. We kind of outgrew that medium. But But thank you for saying that, boy, and keep us surprised of anything on. We love to have you
absolutely.
on, and just let us know any new things happening. And all kidding aside, we'd love to have you and your wife both on at the same time. If you don't think that would break the internet.
No, as you know, in Almost Killed by a Train of Thought, I have a whole section on technology. Because I am the trailing spouse and I follow my wife everywhere, including for the last 20 years, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and equally the Mobile World Congress, which is the big cell phone Congress in Barcelona. And so I write with tongue in cheek about the advances and the regressions in popular technology.
Mm-hmm.
But she writes seriously about this stuff.
Yeah. No, it is. Well, it changes by the second.
Yes, it does.
And then you get into the second layer, the political ramifications of technology, and boy, it is. It is a topic that is ever evolving. So yeah. But
in fact, I have a regular monthly column in EE Times called Reality Bites.
Like
wow.
that.
Yeah.
We'll have to look that up too.
So if you go to eetimes.com, you can find me there.
All right.
That sounds like my autobiography that I'm writing, Reality Bites.
Yes.
With that, we won't get into too much detail except to start wrapping up the show.
Well, I'll interview you about that.
Probably you help me write it. I always need a different perspective, so I don't always try to embellish some things.
I'm a brutal copy editor. You don't want me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I need, because believe me, this mind will try to, as Kelly will tell you, try to make something that really isn't. So, I mean, well, listen, David, we better wrap things up. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Always love seeing you.
Yes, we do. We do. And with that, we'll say goodbye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by...
You're hurt in a wreck. Why would you even think about calling the insurance company first?
Call someone who's going to work for you, not against you.
The insurance companies are not on your side. We are.
We are Lerner and Rowe.
Lerner and Rowe are the lawyers for you. Call 222-2222.